Okay, hello everyone. My name is Radcliffe and I'm a 21-year-old trans guy.
And I'm Liam. I'm also a 21-year-old trans guy.
We are making this video to talk about what it's like to be trans, I guess, on a college campus, and we'll talk about a thing called microaggressions and how we experience them as trans people.
So, microaggressions are brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults towards members of an oppressed group. So, microaggressions can range from small interactions that someone may not have even intended to be hurtful at all to physical assault and things like that.
Okay, so trans is when a person doesn't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, and that can be a lot of things. So that can be like a female to male transgender person identifies as male, even though they were assigned upon birth as female. But trans is an umbrella term to basically refer to anyone who doesn't identify as the gender they were assigned at birth. So that can include non-binary people, genderqueer people, intersex people, um, yeah, and agender people, and any sort of permutation of that, because it's basically people don't have to have a gender. And then there's a term called cisgender, which is basically when a person does identify as the gender they were assigned at birth. So if you were assigned as female and today you identify as female, then you would be a cisgender woman.
So one of the major tenets of microaggressions is that there's a difference between the intention and the impact that happens. So whether someone even realizes that they're committing a microaggression at all, or whether they don't realize that what they're saying is hurtful, the intention, although it could be good, results in I don't know, let's say one paper cut per microaggression. So if someone says to me something like misgenders me or refers to me by my birth name, it's really hurtful for me. And it's often really hurtful because those things happen day in and day out. So if I got one paper cut over a month, it wouldn't really bother me that much. And it would just be one paper cut. But if I get 10 paper cuts a day, that's 70 paper cuts a week, and it's really painful. And so it's important to understand microaggressions and understand how you can, as Rad was saying, react in a situation to microaggressions.
Let me give you an example of when this happened to me. So I was in a class recently, and this was not too long ago, so I was about 8 months on hormones at this time, so I didn't even look like a girl. I wasn't even passing as a girl. I was passing completely as male, and a classmate of mine misgendered me in front of my entire class, in front of my teacher, whom I wasn't out to, who didn't really know me, and a lot of classmates who didn't know this about me, and he misgendered me incorrectly, and I called him on it. I said, "Don't do that anymore. You're past this grace period. I can't let you do that. It's dangerous for me." Later, he approached me in the bathroom and tried to talk to me about it, and I said to him, one, I don't want to go over it anymore. It's not really my problem that you can't gender me correctly, and two, I don't want to talk about it in the bathroom with you right now. And for the most part, things like that happen all the time are really hurtful to me, but to the person who commits those acts against me, it doesn't really seem like a big deal because it's just a slip-up or just a mistake. But when this is my everyday reality and what so much is at stake for me, when mistakes like that are made, it cuts way, way deeper.
So Rad's story is a great example of one of the common microaggressions that take place against trans people. This includes use of transphobic language, misgendering someone, using their incorrect pronouns. So in Rad's story, he was misgendered publicly, and then the person came to him in the bathroom and tried to talk to him about it, and he didn't realize the impact of the situation. So other examples of this are when people also know what your name that you're going by as, your real name, and they choose to refer to you as your birth name. That's also a type of microaggression. Goes along the same vein as refusing to use he for instance, me instead of she or them or some other alternative. One example that happens often with non-binary people is that people don't realize the legitimacy of different types of pronouns. So for they and them, people may refuse to use they and them because they haven't heard it before or don't believe in its validity. But that's really impactful and causes a lot of hurts and paper cuts to the trans person, that gender nonconforming person. I'm going to talk about a personal experience of mine that elicits some of the aspects of microaggressions against trans people. When I was first coming out, the first couple months that I identified as trans, one of my closest friends often asked me very invasive questions about my transition. First of all, he refused to call me by my name that I was going by, Liam, and often asked me why he couldn't just use the other name, my birth name. And then once he started to try and use my regular name that I was going by, Liam, he would often misgender me. He would often bring up trans-related things that I didn't provoke, I didn't want to talk about. And he would ask me questions about my body and what I was doing with my body and how I was going to transition. And all of these things were all small microaggressions towards me that really add up and they really hurt. Because to me, it felt like an invalidation of my identity and I didn't feel safe in that space and I felt pressured to disclose parts of myself that I wasn't choosing to.
The important takeaway from that is that relationships are very complicated, and especially when relationships include a person who is transgender. And I'm not talking about just romances, I'm talking about friendships too, because there's a lot at stake. The important thing to remember is that just because a person is trans, it doesn't mean that private things about themselves then become open to consumption of other people. People often are under the misconception that in order for them to accept or understand our identity, we have to prove it to them by telling them about our transition process or our or what's in our pants or what our family situation is like or what kind of surgeries we want, and that stuff isn't necessary.
All of those things are things that trans people decide to disclose to other people, and if they don't decide to disclose it, it's really not any of the business of the other person.
Okay, so we've given a lot of information and a lot of examples, but we're also gonna give you all watching this video some tips on what you can do when you inevitably commit a microaggression, because the fact of the matter is they happen all the time and doesn't mean you're a bad person, but just through unlearning different things, you have to accept that those things are going to happen. So let's say like Liam gets misgendered and he is correcting a person, and then what would be really helpful for that person to do is just to apologize, and not spend too much time on apologizing, and just move on and seek to make a change in their behavior in the future.
Right. So the best thing that you can do in the moment is to make it as short as possible, especially if you're in public. You don't want to further exacerbate the trans person's uncomfortableness or potential embarrassment. You want to communicate that to the trans person that, of course, you didn't mean to intend that microaggression. Yes, it happened, and you know what? You do it quickly and you move on, and you do better next time.
And when you're able to, like apologize and admit that you were wrong, it makes the trans person in your life feel safer and feel more comfortable. I know at least it would for me. And I think that's really important in fostering safety and compassion and just like overall like happiness in relationships with a person who's transgender, because it can be very, very difficult.
And especially since, like, we've said a lot throughout this video that microaggressions happen all the time. As trans people, we experience them all the time, every day, from systematic things like there not being bathrooms accessible to us, to teachers calling us by the wrong name, to, simply someone misgendering you. And no one's exempt from committing microaggressions, but it's important to realize what they are, that though the intention may be not hurtful, the impact can be, and that the accumulation of all of the different types of microaggressions and that someone experiences throughout their life, week, day even, leads to it being a painful experience.